aliens, that we exist within macro dimensions of what he calls the labyrinth. And we're awakening to our own death. So the labyrinth deceives us into complacent acceptance of events. The unsuspecting voyager is unaware of any transition into death. Macro dimensions tend to masquerade as ordinary life, meaning that we think we're living an ordinary life. Guides appear, but we explain them to ourselves as simple changes of light playing tricks on the vision. The sweeping tonal harmonics of macro-dimensional sounds we translate to common understandable phenomena. Horns of passing traffic, airplanes, music, orchestral, choral, heavily metallic. The mind transforms labyrinth phenomena into ordinary phenomena of the present consciousness. Remember that the nature of the phenomenal world, the lower dimensions, is phenomena. All the phenomena of the organic world, the human dimension, as well as the labyrinth, the death dimension with its macro dimensions, are controlled by the being attention, because higher mind controls itself, unlike lower mind, which is controlled by the environment. But unfortunately, the awareness of an individual generally doesn't include awareness of or control over the mind. What is called the mind in ordinary intercultural translations of higher ideas is simply the result of the activities of the primary attention of the being, the cosmic nature of which is voidness, which is called in this treatise the essential self, that which is one's own, the deepest self, existing only temporarily, dependent upon the biological self. One of the problems with an untrained individual who has not inculcated within himself first-hand knowledge of the subtle feelings and sensations of the macro-dimensional domains of the death labyrinth, which during the lifetime are hidden under the dominant organic feelings, perceptions, and sensations of organic life, is to actually notice the unusual non-organic nature of the macro-dimensional environment without dropping into blackout, waking up only after it's all over. A normal human primate, given the usual education and routine life experience, just doesn't have the slightest idea of what's going on, where they are, what's happening around them, their feelings and sensing their sensations, the events proceeding all around us, not even 1/1,000,000th of it. We can't expect to notice that anything is different in the macro dimensions of the labyrinth when the only difference is the quality of the experience and not the imagery. That's why we need to train ourselves to feel, sense, and be aware of ourselves and our environment, not to enhance our sex lives or personality, but to be sensitive to change on a much deeper level than the organic mind and its primate level senses and values. Something very little known in the East and definitely unknown in the West is that the voyage in the labyrinth of death continues all the time. Gold says, the labyrinth underlies the organic world. The vibrations of the macro dimensions of the labyrinth are dominated by the organic vibrations, which are heavier and easier to sense through biological machine and human awareness than the direct but subtle perceptions of the dimensional domains. Another fact, you can enter and leave the macro dimensions of the labyrinth at any time for periods of seconds, minutes, hours, or years, up to eternities, and experience rebirth, not necessarily in an infant biological machine. You can be reborn at any time and into any size, shape, and age biological machine, which would indicate that you don't end up just being 20. Everybody's age may be different in your rebirth. Your subjective experience, unless you have had training in feeling and sensing, is as if nothing unusual has happened. All the experiences in the macro-dimensional domains of the labyrinth tend to go unnoticed, and you may take subtle rebirth without knowledge or control. However, once in a biological machine, you insist that those are your memories and your interests, and that you have always had that biological machine. After all, if you had been in the macro-dimensional domains of the labyrinth and then been reborn into the present dimension, you'd know it, wouldn't you? It would be obvious. You would know that you were dead, right? You know you're dead. Have you asked yourself, am I dead? The ordinary individual changes habitation in each of the 6, what Gold calls lower tertiary dimensions without realizing it. Anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes to hundreds of times every few days. But try explaining that to someone who couldn't tell you what's been going on for the last minute and a half. Gold tries to explain different experiences that can happen that would indicate that you're in one of these macro-dimensional domains of existence outside of normal human living. Perhaps you find yourself in a bus or train or a plane or any other form of public transportation, where you're compulsively walking from room to room in a house or apartment and you can't seem to stop moving or reduce the restlessness and agitation, yet you're not actually in an anxiety state. In a small chamber with someone whose face keeps changing subtly as the light is playing upon it. Or if you're alone for long periods of time, in an older hotel room or motel room, you're continually going into a bathroom or kitchen or back and forth from bathroom to kitchen, or waking up suddenly from a nightmare or a dream about yourself having just had a different biological machine, not necessarily of the earth varieties. Driving in a car for a long period of time, watching a clock that moves impossibly slow. Or you're in an older theater with balconies and basement watching a film that seems familiar to you, but you can't remember having seen it before. Usually the film will have an unusual amount of senseless violence, or seem very religious, or both. Or getting a phone call in the middle of the night from someone you know is dead, or apparently attending a funeral for someone else, even more suspicious when the deceased is conspicuously unidentified and perhaps unidentifiable. Or you're lost in a small but unaccountably complex town, or a very large, unaccountably complex city. You'll notice a lot of these different scenarios appear like you're in a dream. And a lot of times I find myself in dreamlike settings, and I find myself awakening within this setting. So, are you experiencing unusual things that are happening that don't make sense? Perhaps you are caught in one of these macro dimensions. Perhaps that's my role now, is to awaken you to your existence within one of these macro dimensions. Now, I'm not saying your life is unimportant. I believe every life in every dimension is important. And there are significant lessons that we are learning no matter where we find ourselves conscious. But we may have been through this life before, or yesterday we may have been in an entirely different life. We've awakened now, and the only way that you know it is that right now in this moment, you have these memories, but you don't really know if they're your true memories for where you're at. Gold explains that one of the first problems in dealing with the between lives area is realizing that it's not really between lives or reincarnation, but the same life lived through creation, skipping like a flat stone on water into the voidness of non-creation. But the change in state doesn't change the life you're living, and ought not to affect your consciousness unless your consciousness is dependent on your actions in samsara, the world of illusionary influences and centralized ego reality. When you first came into the cosmos, your idea principally was, or at any rate your hope is now, to maintain the thread of consciousness throughout your experience in the universe. Usually it works out that what with all the fascination and sudden experiences and emotional sensory shocks and sympathy, with the focus of attention of the biological machine and constant demands on your attention, before you realize you're being dragged into a muddled existence and your thread of consciousness has been disrupted. We could dwell upon it, recalling in vivid, graphic detail how you got caught in biological games, but basically it boils down to the fact that you intend to liberate yourself, and the universe is going to do its damnedest to stop you. And if it can't bring you to a complete stop, then at least it's going to slow you down for a while. The universe becomes like a grasping mother, a Chinese finger trap. For every ounce of intention you have of getting yourself liberated, there's 1 trillion tons of counter-intention stacked up against you. So what are your actual chances of liberation? Just how effective is this idea that we can escape from death in the afterlife? Later on, Gold explains there are several fundamental problems in the death labyrinth. One of them is the simplest to spot and the hardest to deal with. You get so caught up in the pursuits of primate life that you're no longer interested in your prime aim as a voyager, the aim you had when you came into the cosmic theater in the first place. And now you're interested in how it all comes out and in doing something about it by changing the experience. You're so interested in all of that that you haven't got the time or interest to waste on all this ethereal and impractical spiritual stuff. No one can force you to practice meditation and spiritual teachings. Maybe this time all you want to do is to refamiliarize yourself with them, not actually put them to use. So you read, you study, you go to a few lectures, you listen to some podcasts, maybe do a little yoga, jogging, or racquetball. If you want to go further out with it, you could change your diet. You wear looser clothes. That's the first major problem of the macro-dimensional domains, no practical experience during the lifetime. The middle of a voyage in the macro dimensions is one hell of a time to get your first practical experience with the teaching. Gold says the prime aim when confronted with the absolute is to realize that you are the shining void without losing yourself. I say without losing yourself to ease the Western mind, but how can you lose what can't be lost? You may lose or consider lost many things during the merging process, but never the essential self. The essential self may have been hidden under a tremendous load of conditioning, but when the biological self has been stripped off, you will see that what's real about you was never lost, hidden under a mound of insufferable egocentricity, perhaps, but never actually lost. The simple thing like recognizing the dream as a dream while we're in it is almost impossible for most of us. Thus, the potential for becoming enlightened, which is so tantalizingly close all the time we are there, is constantly missed because we simply cannot get it together to focus and recognize. According to this information, simply by thinking of someone who is dead, it's like an instantaneous phone call. They will be there. So the question is, am I dead? Do I exist within one of these macro dimensions? Or am I still within my current living experience, having not experienced one of the death bardos? I don't know. Something tells me that I am. Something tells me that I'm brought into the experience of others that have experienced something similar and that we're sharing this reality together. It is very much like any other reality. I get headaches, I get hungry, I go through all the normal things that a physical, biological person would. But the reality around me is much more dreamlike. Perhaps that's why I'm obsessed with the new earth and shifts in consciousness, because I am trying to find an explanation for this dreamlike quality to the world around me. But clearly, a shift or transformation happened, and I will continue to ask this question because it saddens me. So the question is, am I dead? And how disappointed I am that I wasn't able to offer services to the world around me. I offered nothing. I was useless. And that drives me in this reality that I'm in. And I would love to know if anybody else has these feelings or thoughts. It's totally natural and normal. And the purpose of this episode is to discuss death, life, and the world that we are in,